All right, guys, it is time finally to do our RLCS major power rankings, how I think these teams will do. And I haven't exactly written my list out yet. And I think I'm just going to do it live here in this video um, and kind of go from there. This is probably a bad idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to actually bring up Wikipedia and just have it available just so I have it. But we're going to kind of go over it and yeah, let me know what your rankings are. Let me know what you hate about my rankings, obviously. But we're going to do it. And then we'll probably have a prediction video probably following this the following day. So then we could base it kind of off our power rankings, but also with some upsets here or there. So let's get into it. Oh, I broke it. Hold on. There we go. All right, power rankings. This is what everyone wants, right? Everyone loves these lists. This might change. I haven't watched all the tape I want to watch, but so this might change before I go live at the major, but it probably won't change much. But for hindsight, like today is Friday for me, and I leave tomorrow, but then I have to be there for a couple extra days to do like visa appointments and stuff. So I'm gonna watch more tape there on some of these teams. But I wanted to kind of get all these videos out now because I'm gonna be busy, or like what if the hotel Wi-Fi doesn't like upload and like all that stuff, right? So I didn't want to have to worry about it then. So that's my preface, and let's just get right into it. We'll start at the bottom, and then we'll work our way up. Well, we'll start. All right, like I'll make this easy at least at the beginning. Um, Everyone knows that K Corp is number one, so we'll put them number one just early on. There is no real discussion around that. They perfectly swept Europe, which is the best region in the world, or was at least last year. Pretty much always has been, outside of maybe a quick a little bit where performed well. So you kind of have to, right? There's no real like it just has to be done. So let's go to the bottom. We'll go Limitless for now, making their major debuts in the SSA region. Um, we'll see what they could do. Like obviously, it's a little bit harder for teams like this to get the practice and all that stuff. They're still building up to be a more competitive region, right? So it's going to take some time. Not too much to say here, but Limitless, I have them at the bottom. Next up, I do have Elevate. I know some people might have Elevate above Pioneers. I need to watch a little bit more tape on both these teams just to really narrow this down. These could flip on my like final list, I guess you would say. But I like APAC had a good run last year at Worlds, but like I'm not even sure if Elevate is the best team in APAC necessarily. Sure, they obviously made it and they deserve to be here. I'm not saying that, but like I'm not positive. I have to watch more tape on them. I'm going to put them at 15 with a possibility that they move up one spot. Couldn't move them up any further. But I want to watch a little bit more, but I'm probably going to get to that while I'm out in Copenhagen. Next up, we have Pioneers. I'll put them here. They have started to catch up to Power, but Power has obviously dominated OCE. And OCE is generally a region that you're going to put pretty far down these lists because they haven't done anything in many years, right? That they haven't got any top eights in a while. So Pioneers can't really put them any higher than this. They could drop below Elevate, but I'm thinking it's probably doubtful. But yeah, I'm going to put them there. We're not going to like sit on these teams forever either, but yeah. Next up, I am going to put Power here. I don't have faith in OC until they show me something. I know we go through this every single major, I feel like, where people will try and hype up OC. Like, even I've probably tried to, and then it's like, it just doesn't work, right? It's like they just falter again and again and again. Power is their best shot because they dominated OC. Normally, OC, their region that trades wins with one another. There's normally like three teams in that conversation. But Power is clearly the number one in OC. There's a wider gap, obviously, between Power and Pioneers than maybe Pioneers and Elevate. But I just can't. I can't put them any higher versus the teams that are showing up at this LAN. Yeah, I just can't. Next up is where the list is going to be like, all right, I haven't thought about this completely yet, and I want to kind of go through it in my process. I'm going to go Luminosity here. And now Corellian Spaceman can hate me forever. Luminosity, we'll even write out their full name for them. Why not? Even though I didn't write it out for anyone else. Luminosity, they're a weird team. Like a lot of people think Space Station should be here besides the Luminosity. I don't really care about that. It doesn't really matter to me. It's more of like Luminosity. Just every Swiss goes 3-2. They did have one like nice bracket, but they did make it work, right? And obviously they're there boot camping early. They should have the work ethic to possibly move up, but it's just hard to move them up against any of the other teams here because they they were supposed to downgrade, honestly, and hats off to Cheese for coming in. Like AJ leaves that team, and Cheese comes in and performs exceptionally. He was definitely one of the players of the split. Probably not MVP of the split, but in the top 5, right? Like Cheese was having a great split, which is great to see. But at the same time, like teams around them all formed like these super talented teams that, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to put Luminosity there. They could possibly move up one spot, which we'll get to right now, but I'm going to have them at 12. Next up, I'm going to put Rule 1 at 11. I want to watch a little bit more tape on them, but the tape I have watched, I have not been impressed at all. Like, obviously, Falcons have dominated that region. Going into this season, my projections were that Rule 1 possibly would be 2, but they might start falling back to 3 because of, like, just father time is going to happen at some point with Ahmad and O'Khaled. It's just, I don't necessarily see them keeping up pace. And obviously, work ethic and all that. Mina, they are unmatched, I think, among anyone. But they didn't have a great season or a split. They got dominated by Falcons most of the time outside of qualifier 2. I just don't see them making a lot of waves here. I really don't. They obviously got top 8 of Worlds, or at least 2/3 of their squad did. But like, it really feels like Falcons made the super team in Mina, and then the leftovers kind of went to Rule 1. So I don't have a lot of faith in them in this tournament. So yeah, I have Rule 1 there. Next up, I would have. This one's tough. It's either OG or Complexity. I'm just trying to figure out who I would want to put here. Oof, that's tough. I feel like OG obviously got hot towards the end, but is it enough? Complexity did like a side grade on a roster move that hasn't necessarily panned out. Like, it hasn't been bad. They've obviously done well. They're not up to Furious standards, but I don't think anyone. So I think more people thought they'd be a little bit more competitive in Qual 2 and Qual 3. And I think they still are pretty competitive, that they just lost those matches. You know what? I'm going to be an NA hater. I'm going to go OG here. Like OG, 3 veterans, definitely LAN players that can play on LAN. It's just, I'm not sure what level we'll see from them. They could pop off, make a top 8. It's very, very possible. Like, obviously, they're very close on this list already. They'll be in that 2-2 round, I think, very, very likely. But I'm going to get a lot of hate. But I just, like, NA hasn't really impressed me outside of Gen.g and G2. So I have them relatively low. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Next up, we'll do Complexity. Complexity, they were a great team last year who just couldn't get the job done when it mattered most, right? In those final moments of games, in big LAN moments, they just couldn't get it done. Brendan Dorito doesn't have the greatest LAN chops either. But I think them as a whole, they're a very talented squad. I think they could do some damage here. And I think I'm higher on them than probably most people are. But I think CRR and Razebull alone, like CRR, I think is one of the better players in the world at times, and he can be a difference maker when it matters most on either side of the field. Plays fantastic defense, can also play amazing offense as well. I really like CRR. I'm very high on CRR. But I think they're still a very talented squad. They were probably the NA2 last year, and now they move over to Sam. And sure, it was a side grade, and maybe they fell a little bit to Furia. Maybe it is a downgrade, or maybe they're just not playing as well. But I don't think it's enough to drop them too far down that NA list, at least, right? So I'm going to leave them above OG and Luminosity. Moving on to the top 8 of who I think are the best of the best. Oof. All right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Jorby's not going to like me. I'm not that high on Furia. I'm really not. I think they're good. They're a very talented squad, obviously. I love King Drew. King Drew, amazing. Drewfinho, great roster pickup. If you guys watch my tape-in or my review of Sam, you know I'm not a big fan of Lost. I'm just not a big fan of how he positions on the field, and I am concerned when it comes to the higher competitive matches against like these higher teams that Lost might get lost on the field. Furia last year, not a good team. They finally kind of figured out in spring, but then they do absolutely nothing like at the spring major as well. So I worry that like they're not going to do well at this land necessarily. I still have them like in the quarterfinal round, but just barely. I think they are going to have some troubles, and I don't think they're as good as other people might expect. So I'm going to put them there. Next up, we got Gentle Mates. So this is where the EU teams will begin to come in. Like, I think they've earned that respect. They were the top 4 teams of Worlds. They were basically top 4 at Spring too. There was one MENA team in there, but still, like, Europe, very, very dominant. I don't think that changes much necessarily because in a long off season, I feel like if you had that gap already, they're all practicing versus one another. Maybe it's the consolidation of talent that might make Gentle Mates fall down a little bit further, but I don't think that's the case. Also, it's a European LAN, and sometimes that's going to be helpful for, you know, those European teams because they don't have to do as much travel. It's less taxing. It's less out of the norm. So I think that would favor Europe anyway. So I'm going to put Gentle Mates here. Yeah. Number 6. I think I'll put Falcons here. I think I'm going to put Falcons here. I don't necessarily. Oh, I'm not sure. Like, they could obviously make a top 4. I'm not like that concerned about them there. It's just when it comes to consistency, I'm just more worried about them in Swiss than maybe I am for the rest of the teams here. They obviously dominated MENA. Absolutely dominated. Will that translate? I don't know. And sometimes I worry when a team does dominate so hard in the region. We kind of talked about this a little bit on the shows with G2 and gen.g. I didn't like if you're an NA fan, I don't think you wanted G2 to dominate the entire time because then when they go up against tougher competition, it might be more difficult, right? And that's where like Falcons like they can definitely pop off. They can definitely make a bracket run. I'm just mildly concerned, and it's not a big concern, but compared to the other teams I'm about to have on this list, I would be a little bit more concerned with them going into Swiss and maybe falling into that 2-2 round and getting like an upset loss there. So I'll have Falcons at 6. Next up, all right, just get your comments out now, please, before you see this pick, and then just don't go back and edit your comments. All right, I'm going to go G2 here at number 5. We talked about this on the Wave and Gibbs Power Ranking show. I did have Gen G higher than G2. I don't buy this. They didn't try as hard or they got complacent, yada, yada, yada. I mean, if that's the case, then like just get a better mentality. Like look at K Corp, right? Like I don't really buy that necessarily. G2 was the number one team in NA. They lost twice to Gen G in the same tournament. I feel like Gen G has figured out their problems. Like I think if that's a different team, right? Like say a G2 wins both regionals, and then like a Luminosity somehow wins that final tournament. I think it's a different story, right? You'd still love G2 probably number one. But preseason rankings, at least for me, I had Gen G number one, G2 number two. You could say 1A, 1B, which is perfectly fine. But you always expected the Gen G we saw in the final regional to be what we saw the entire time, right? It took them a little while to figure it out. But I think once they figure it out, I'm not as concerned with them now. It's not like I think that was a one off, right? Because it's Gen G, right? They have the accolades, they have the players to do it again. So I'm not thinking that's a fluke necessarily. G2 could easily bounce back too. But for now, I think I would have, because Gen G won the last one, I would have Gen G above G2. I get it that G2 had a better record overall, but recency bias, I think I would side with the Gen G side. Also, Gen G, overall better LAN players than G2, outside of maybe Atomic. Like Daniel Beast Mode are fine LAN players, but they're not amazing outside of Gamers 8, but Gamers 8 I don't really count. Maybe that helps with their clutch gene, maybe they figure that out. But in terms of 3v3 play, like, they generally have not done that well. They've done okay, but they haven't done what a Gen G or a First Killer has, right? So that's why I would have G2 there. Next up, Gen G. I'm going to put Gen G here. They're very close to each other. Like, there's a very minimal gap here. There's, like, if this is 4A and 4B, that's fine. Gen G is up next, kind of the same story. A bunch of great LAN players. They've shown that they can do it before. Gen G, they won Fall Major. Winter Major, First Killer makes finals. Then we see Gen G in spring be the top NA team yet again, even after bad online split. And then they're also the top NA team again at Worlds. Like, obviously, they tied with a bunch of teams, but they were the best, right? So Gen G, I'm not concerned with them. I think they will perform when it matters most on LAN. So I have them there. Another team that performs very well on LAN is Vitality. Tons of question marks around Vitality. But I think at the end of the day, they are back-to-back LAN champions. I get it, new coach. The players are not necessarily playing the same, long off season. I still think it deserves some respect. And also because Europe was so dominant last year, that even if Vitality looks bad in Europe, that doesn't necessarily mean they're worse than NA, right? Or like anyone, really. So I still have a lot of respect for Europe as a whole. So I think Vitality, they still earn that third seed. And they can obviously win this whole thing. Like, if they figure it out at the right time, they can obviously do it. So I'm going to go Vitality there. That leaves BDS for number two. They clearly were the number two team in Europe this entire split, basically. So you can't really put them anywhere else. Like, K Corp is obviously number one. They've dominated, but BDS has been right there with them. They obviously kind of lost a little bit harder to K Corp in the final, like qualifiers and stuff. But I still think BDS, Monkey Moon, please don't make another grand finals and lose, please. At least drop out top four or something. I don't know. But right now, BDS I have is the number two favorite. Like, if we're looking at bet nods of like who's the favorites, like K Corp, huge favorite, right? Like, I think if you did K Corp versus the field, honestly, that's a tough bet. I'm not sure which way you would go. I think maybe because of the format, you might pick the field because K Corp could slip up, I guess. But I'm not, like, honestly, that's a tough call. I'm not really sure. But BDS would definitely be the next favorites, in my opinion. Then Vitality, then Gen G, well, all right. To win the tournament, I think G2 actually has slightly better odds than a Gen G. But to place higher, I would go Gen G. So I think G2, if they peak, yes, they can win this tournament. But I could also see them being a little more inconsistent. Just due to the track record of Daniel and Beast Mode at lands. In the past, it's like not always been perfect, right? Obviously, it's a different team and all that. So we'll see how it all plays out. But here's what I would say is my power rankings. Probably not too many teams would flip here. Maybe Falcons would leapfrog Gen G and G2, but I doubt I would go with that. And then Gentlemates, I guess, could leapfrog. Or like the 6, 7, and 8 could probably rearrange in some form. I think Furia, though, would probably not move ahead of Falcons based on what I've seen so far, at least. But yeah, these are my power rankings. What do you guys think? Let me know if I am just completely wrong here, which is perfectly fine. Because when we get to land and these are the exact places they finish in, we'll talk on that Monday. Well, probably not Monday because I'll be flying. But on that Tuesday, we will talk about it. But here we go. Power rankings done, in the bag. Thank you all for watching. Appreciate all the support on all the videos. Love ya. See you in Copenhagen. Goodbye.